Geography Podcast by Peter Dubois. Corrosion is where rocks on the beach are thrown together by the waves and broken up into smaller pieces. Hydraulic action is a form of erosion caused by the force of moving water currents rushing into a crack in the rock face. Corrosion is when land or a cliff is worn away by the elements. And attrition is when the particles are knocked about as they're transported and they gradually become more rounded and reduced in size. A spit is formed when the prevailing wind blows at an angle to the coastline, which causes a longshore drift. When that keeps happening, stuff from the bottom of the sea will come up and form land, as you can see in the diagrams. A longshore drift is basically transportation of sediments like clay, silt, and sand along a coast at an angle to the shoreline, which causes spits. Coastal or cliff erosion is the wearing away of land and the removal of beach or dune sediments by wave action. Shoreline, as you can see in the diagram, consists of the back shore, which is all the way in the back, and the foreshore is where the water meets the sand, and the height of the waves, tide. Low tide all the way in the bottom, high tide being much higher, and offshore is all the way at the top. Tumblosis is basically when waves keep hitting the sides of the river and it hits the main part of the beach. Caves, arches, and stacks. Before a cliff can become a stack, it starts with a crack, and that happens with when waves hit it and it gets little cracks, and after a while, over time, the crack gets bigger, and eventually that will turn into a cave because of all the waves. And when that keeps happening, it'll eventually turn into an arch and break through the other side of the rock. And the arch will grow bigger as waves keep hitting it, and eventually the arch will collapse, and over time it'll just be a stack, and then over time the stack will fall and just become a stump. Transportation and suspension, solution, traction, and saltation. Suspension is basically the small fragments of sand that can be moved or drafted easily through the current. And solution is the bigger amounts of liquids. And traction is the bigger rocks that you can't really move by the current. And saltation is the medium-sized rocks that can be moved easily and deposition. For coral reef development, the water needs to be from 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. There needs to be a smooth, clean line of water that keeps coming in, and there needs to be a lot of sunlight. Fringing barrier reefs and atolls. A fringing reef is a coral reef that forms not too far away from the shoreline, as you can see in the picture all the way on the left. And a barrier reef is a reef that forms parallel to the coastline, which is kind of far away. And an atoll reef is basically a circular reef. There are several ways you can prevent erosion, and some of them are seawalls, groins, and barriers, which can help the water not hit the cliff so hard so it doesn't erode as easily. Some advantages and disadvantages of living in a coastal area. Some advantages are there's a nice sea breeze, there's less pollution, you have a good view of the beach, and the weather is mostly sunny and warm. Some disadvantages are there's a high humidity in the weather, and there's always a chance of storms and tsunamis and bad weather.